Have you ever felt completely alone? Have you ever experienced the painful moment when the people you trusted the most suddenly disappeared from your life? Friends stop calling. Family members become distant. The people who once promised to stay forever quietly walk away. And in that silence, you begin to wonder something terrifying. Am I truly alone? But today, I want to tell you something powerful. Even when the whole world leaves you, Jesus never does. When people abandon you, when doors close, when hope feels far away, Jesus walks closer to you. This is the story of how loneliness can become the place where faith grows the strongest. And by the end of this message, you will understand something life-changing. Your loneliness may actually be where Jesus meets you the most. The silent pain of being left alone. Loneliness is one of the deepest pains a human being can experience. Sometimes it doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people we love. Maybe you trusted someone deeply. Maybe you shared your dreams with them. Maybe you believed they would stay beside you forever. But one day, they left. No explanation. No apology. Just silence. And suddenly your world feels empty. You scroll through your phone, hoping someone will message you. But no one does. You sit alone with your thoughts, wondering what you did wrong. You begin questioning yourself. Am I not good enough? Why do people always leave me? Does anyone really care? These questions can slowly destroy a person's heart. But here is something many people don't realize. Loneliness is not proof that God has abandoned you. In fact, many times loneliness is where God begins His deepest work in your life. Even Jesus experienced loneliness. Many people think that loneliness means weakness. But even Jesus experienced moments of deep loneliness. Think about it. Jesus healed the sick. He fed thousands of people. He showed love to everyone. But when the most difficult moment of his life arrived, many people left him. One of his own disciples betrayed him. Another disciple denied even knowing him. And the crowd that once shouted, "Hosanna," suddenly shouted something very different. "Crucify him." Imagine that moment. The same people who praised him now rejected him. Yet Jesus continued walking forward. He did not stop loving. He did not stop believing in God's plan. Because Jesus knew something powerful. People may abandon you, but God never will. When God removes people from your life, sometimes we think losing people is the end of our story. But sometimes, it is actually the beginning. God sometimes removes people from your life for a reason. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay forever. Some people come to teach you lessons. Some people come to strengthen your character. And some people leave because they were never meant to walk with you into your future. Think about it. If everyone stayed, you might never grow. You might never learn independence. You might never discover your true strength. And most importantly, you might never learn to depend on God. Loneliness forces us to face ourselves. It forces us to ask deeper questions. And sometimes it pushes us closer to Jesus than we have ever been before. The lie that loneliness tells. Loneliness has a dangerous voice. It whispers lies into your mind. It says things like, "Nobody cares about you. You are forgotten. You will always be alone." But those words are not truth. They are fear. And fear can become powerful if we listen to it too long. But the truth is very different. The truth is this. Even when you sit alone in your room, Jesus is there. Even when nobody understands your pain, Jesus understands. Even when the world feels dark, Jesus sees you. You may not hear his voice loudly, but he is closer than you think. Chapter 5. A story about faith in loneliness. Let me tell you about a young man named Daniel. Daniel had always believed in people. He trusted his friends. He helped others whenever they needed support. But life slowly began to change. His closest friends became busy with their own lives. Some stopped replying to his messages. Others slowly drifted away. And one day Daniel realized something painful. The people he once trusted were no longer there. His heart felt heavy. Every evening he would sit alone in his room, staring at the ceiling. Questions filled his mind. Why did everyone leave? Did I do something wrong? Why does God allow this pain? One night, feeling completely broken, Daniel did something he had not done in a long time. He prayed. Not a perfect prayer. Not a long prayer. Just a simple one. Jesus, if you are real, please help me. And something strange happened. Nothing dramatic. No bright light. No loud voice. But slowly, peace began to fill his heart. For the first time in months, Daniel did not feel completely alone. How Jesus walks with us in silence. God doesn't always answer our prayers the way we expect. Sometimes we want instant miracles, instant solutions, instant happiness. But God often works differently. Sometimes he doesn't remove the loneliness immediately. Instead, he walks with us through it. Like a quiet companion. Guiding us slowly. Healing our heart step by step. Daniel began to notice small changes. He started reading the Bible again. He started praying every morning. And little by little, the emptiness in his heart began to disappear. Not because people returned, but because something stronger replaced the loneliness. Faith. Chapter 7. Loneliness can become strength. Many of the strongest people in history walked through lonely seasons. Prophets experienced loneliness. Leaders experienced loneliness. Even great spiritual figures experienced loneliness. But those lonely seasons shaped them. They became stronger, wiser, closer to God. Your loneliness might feel like a curse. But it might actually be preparation. Preparation for the person you are becoming. Because God sometimes isolates people before elevating them. He removes distractions. He removes noise. So that you can hear his voice clearly. You are never truly alone. Right now, someone watching this video may feel completely alone. Maybe your friends forgot you. Maybe your relationship ended. Maybe your family doesn't understand you. and your heart feels tired. But listen carefully. Your story is not over. Your loneliness is not permanent. And most importantly, you are not alone. Because even when everyone walks away, Jesus walks closer. Ending, Part 1. Your lonely season will not last forever. God sees your tears. He hears your silent prayers. And He is preparing something beautiful in your life. But to understand how Daniel's story changed completely, and how God transformed his loneliness into purpose, we must continue the story. The night that changed everything. Daniel still felt lonely sometimes. Faith had started growing in his heart, but the pain had not completely disappeared. Some nights were still heavy. Especially the quiet nights. You know those nights. When the world sleeps, but your mind refuses to rest. One particular night felt different. Daniel sat near the window in his small room. Outside, the street was quiet. The city lights flickered in the distance. But inside his heart, a storm was still raging. He whispered another prayer. Jesus, why does loneliness hurt so much? There was no immediate answer. But something inside him said softly, keep walking. Daniel didn't understand why, but he felt a strange calmness. That night he opened the Bible again. His eyes stopped on a verse he had read many times before. I will never leave you nor forsake you. For the first time, those words felt personal. It was as if Jesus was speaking directly to him. Not to a crowd. Not to the world. But to him. And suddenly Daniel realized something powerful. Even though people had left, Jesus had stayed. God works in the hidden moments. Most miracles do not happen in front of crowds. They happen in quiet places. In bedrooms. In silent prayers. In lonely moments. While the world celebrates loud victories, God often builds strong faith in hidden places. Daniel's life didn't suddenly become perfect. His phone still stayed silent many days. His old friends still lived their own lives. But Daniel began to change. He started waking up early every morning. Instead of scrolling through his phone, he prayed. Instead of worrying about people leaving, he started talking to God. And something surprising began happening. The loneliness that once felt like darkness began to feel like peaceful silence. The power of quiet faith. Faith does not always grow in happy moments. Sometimes it grows in pain. Sometimes it grows in silence. And sometimes it grows when you feel like giving up. Daniel slowly realized something important. Before loneliness entered his life, he depended on people for happiness. He depended on friends for comfort. He depended on attention for validation. But now, he depended on Jesus. And that changed everything. Because people can disappoint you. People can leave. People can forget. But Jesus never does. When God becomes your closest friend. One evening Daniel went for a walk. The sun was setting. Golden light covered the sky. For the first time in months, Daniel felt calm. He sat on a bench in a quiet park, watching people pass by. Couples talking. Friends laughing. Families walking together. A few months ago this sight would have broken his heart. But this time something felt different. Daniel smiled softly. He realized something beautiful. Even though he was sitting alone, he didn't feel lonely. Because he felt God's presence beside him. And in that moment Daniel whispered quietly, "Thank you, Jesus, for staying." The hidden blessing of being alone. Many people fear loneliness. But what if loneliness is actually a gift? A strange gift. A painful gift. But still a gift. Because loneliness removes distractions. It removes noise. It forces you to discover who you really are. And more importantly, it helps you discover who God really is. When everything is loud and busy, we rarely listen to God. But when life becomes silent, His voice becomes clearer. Daniel began to understand this truth. His lonely season was not punishment. It was preparation. God was shaping his heart. Teaching him patience. Teaching him faith. Teaching him trust. The day Daniel almost gave up. Not every day was easy. Some days the old pain returned. One afternoon Daniel opened social media. He saw pictures of his old friends. Laughing. Traveling. Enjoying life. Without him. Suddenly the loneliness returned like a wave. His chest felt heavy. His mind filled with painful thoughts again. Maybe they never cared. Maybe I was never important. Maybe I will always be alone. For a moment, Daniel almost gave up. But then he remembered something. A verse he had read many times. The Lord is close to the broken-hearted. Daniel closed his phone. He knelt beside his bed. And prayed again. Jesus, I feel weak today. And once again, peace slowly returned. Jesus understands your pain. One of the most comforting truths about Jesus is this. He understands pain. He understands rejection. He understands loneliness. Because he experienced it. When Jesus was carrying the cross, many people watched. But very few stood beside him. When he was suffering, many people stayed silent. And yet Jesus continued forward. Not with anger. Not with hatred. But with love. That same love still exists today. And that same love is available for you. Loneliness is not your final chapter. Daniel's story did not end in loneliness. Because loneliness was never meant to be his destination. It was only a season. And seasons always change. What Daniel did not know was that God was already preparing something new in his life. New friendships. New purpose. New strength. But before those blessings arrived, Daniel had to learn one powerful lesson. God must become enough. Because when God becomes enough, everything else becomes a bonus. The quiet transformation. Months passed. Something remarkable happened. Daniel became stronger. Not physically, but emotionally. Spiritually. He was no longer desperate for attention. He was no longer afraid of being alone. Because he had discovered something greater. A relationship with Jesus. And that relationship filled the empty spaces in his heart. But Daniel's story was not finished yet. Because sometimes God allows loneliness to prepare you for something bigger than you imagined. And very soon, Daniel was about to discover why God allowed this lonely season in the first place. If you are feeling lonely right now, remember Daniel's story. Your lonely season is not the end. God is still writing your story. And sometimes, the greatest blessings appear after the loneliest moments. But the most powerful part of Daniel's journey is still ahead. Because the day was coming when God would turn his loneliness into purpose. And when that moment arrives, everything will change. The season of waiting. Life began to move slowly for Daniel. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. From the outside, nothing looked different. Daniel still lived in the same small apartment. He still worked the same simple job. And many of the people who once walked with him were still gone. But inside Daniel's heart, something powerful had changed. He was no longer fighting loneliness. He had learned to live with it. More importantly, he had learned to grow through it. Every morning Daniel would start his day with prayer. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Talking to Jesus had become the most peaceful part of his day. Sometimes he spoke out loud. Sometimes he simply sat in silence. And somehow, that silence no longer felt empty. It felt full. Full of peace. Full of presence. Full of hope. God is preparing something you cannot see. Many people give up too early. They pray once and expect instant answers. They struggle for a few days and expect immediate change. But God often works in ways we cannot see. Like a seed planted deep in the ground. For a long time, nothing appears on the surface. It looks like nothing is happening. But underneath the soil, roots are growing. Strength is developing. Life is forming. Daniel didn't know it yet. But God was doing something similar in his life. God was preparing him. Preparing his heart. Preparing his mind. Preparing his future. And sometimes preparation requires isolation. Because isolation removes distractions. It clears space for growth. The unexpected phone call. One afternoon Daniel's phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. Normally he would ignore it. But something told him to answer. Hello? A voice responded on the other side. Hi, is this Daniel? Yes. This is Mark. We met a long time ago at church. Daniel tried to remember. The name sounded familiar. But they had only spoken briefly years ago. Mark continued. We are starting a small community group at church. And someone mentioned your name. Daniel was surprised. Why me? Mark laughed gently. Because people said you are someone who listens well, and encourages others. For a moment Daniel didn't know what to say. Encouraging others? Just a few months ago he was the one who felt completely broken. But Mark said something that stayed with Daniel. Sometimes the people who understand pain the most are the ones who can help others the best. Turning pain into purpose. That evening Daniel went to the church group meeting. He felt nervous. It had been a long time since he had spent time around people. When he walked into the room, there were about 8 people sitting in a circle. Some looked happy. Some looked tired. Some looked quietly broken. But one thing was clear. Everyone in that room carried pain. The conversation started slowly. People shared small struggles. Work stress. Family problems. Loneliness. And suddenly Daniel realized something shocking. He was not the only person who had felt alone. So many people around him were silently fighting their own battles. But nobody talked about it. Then something unexpected happened. One young man began sharing his story. His voice was shaking. "I feel like nobody cares about me anymore." The room became quiet. Daniel's heart suddenly felt heavy. Because those words sounded exactly like the thoughts he once had. Without planning to, Daniel spoke. "I understand that feeling." Everyone turned to look at him. And for the first time, Daniel shared his story. The power of sharing your story. Daniel spoke honestly. He told them about the nights he felt completely alone. He told them about the friends who disappeared. He told them about the pain that almost broke him. But he also told them something else. He told them how Jesus stayed. How prayer slowly healed his heart. How faith replaced the emptiness. When Daniel finished speaking, the room was silent. Not an uncomfortable silence, but a meaningful one. Then the young man who spoke earlier wiped tears from his eyes. And said softly, "I thought I was the only one who felt like this." Daniel shook his head. "You're not alone." And suddenly, something powerful happened. Hope entered the room. The reason God allowed your loneliness. That night when Daniel walked home, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Purpose. For months he had asked God one question. Why did this loneliness happen to me? But now he finally understood. God allowed his pain so he could help others heal. Because people who have never experienced loneliness often struggle to understand it. But people who have walked through it can guide others through the darkness. Daniel's lonely season had not been wasted. It had prepared him for something greater. Helping others find hope, a new beginning. Over the next few weeks the small church group continued meeting. Something beautiful started happening. People opened their hearts. They shared their struggles. They prayed for each other. And slowly, those lonely individuals started forming real friendships. Daniel was no longer sitting alone in his room every night. Now he was encouraging others. Listening to their stories. Praying for them. And every time he helped someone, his own heart felt stronger. God uses broken people. One of the greatest truths about faith is this. God rarely uses perfect people. He uses broken people. People who have struggled. People who have cried. People who have felt lost. Because broken people understand compassion. They understand pain. And they know how powerful hope can be. Daniel once believed his loneliness was a weakness. But now he understood something powerful. His loneliness had become his strength, the life-changing realization. One evening after the group meeting, Daniel stayed behind in the church hall. The room was quiet. The chairs were empty. Soft light filled the room. Daniel sat down and closed his eyes. He whispered a prayer. Jesus, thank you. For a moment he remembered the lonely nights. The painful silence. The tears. But now those memories felt different. They were no longer wounds. They were reminders of how far God had brought him. And Daniel finally understood something life-changing. If those lonely nights had never happened, he would never have discovered his purpose. Sometimes the darkest seasons of life lead to the brightest purposes. The loneliness you feel today may be preparing you to help someone tomorrow. God never wastes pain. He transforms it. And Daniel's story is about to reach its most powerful moment. Because very soon, he will discover that the people who once left him will see a completely different person. A stronger person. A faithful person. A person whose life was changed by Jesus, the day everything made sense. Months passed after Daniel joined the church group. Life had slowly started changing. Not in a sudden dramatic way, but in small meaningful ways. Daniel had new people around him now. Not many, but real ones. People who listened. People who prayed. People who cared. One evening after the group meeting, Daniel walked home under the quiet night sky. The air was calm. The streets were peaceful. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel felt something deep in his heart. Gratitude. He whispered quietly, Jesus, thank you for never leaving me. At that moment he remembered the lonely nights from the past. The nights when he thought nobody cared. The nights when he believed his life had no meaning. But now, everything made sense. God had not abandoned him. God had been preparing him. When old doors close. A few days later something unexpected happened. Daniel received a message on his phone. It was from an old friend. One of the friends who had slowly disappeared from his life months ago. The message said, Hey Daniel, it's been a long time. How are you? For a moment Daniel stared at the screen. A year ago this message would have filled him with excitement. But now something had changed. Daniel was not angry. He was not bitter. But he was also not desperate anymore. Because his happiness no longer depended on people's attention. He replied kindly. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well too. That was all. No long explanation. No emotional reaction. Just peace. Because Daniel had learned something powerful. When God closes certain doors in your life, He does it to protect your future. Not everyone who walked with you in the past is meant to walk with you forever. The people who truly stay. One evening the church group sat together sharing their stories again. The young man who once said, I feel like nobody cares about me, spoke again. But this time his voice sounded different. Stronger. More hopeful. He said, "These meetings changed my life." Another woman in the group nodded. "I used to feel invisible, but now I feel like someone understands me." Daniel sat quietly listening. A warm feeling filled his heart. And he realized something incredible. The loneliness that once broke him had connected him with people who truly needed hope. If he had never experienced that pain, he would never have been able to help them. God had turned his lonely season into a mission. You never know who needs your story. One of the most powerful things you can do in life is share your story. Because somewhere in the world, someone is fighting the same battle you once fought. Someone is crying the same tears you once cried. Someone is asking the same questions you once asked. And your story may be the answer they are searching for. Daniel began speaking more openly about his journey. Not to gain attention, but to give hope. And every time he shared his story, someone in the room would say the same thing. "I thought I was the only one." But they weren't. And neither are you. Jesus was there the whole time. Looking back at his life, Daniel realized something beautiful. Jesus had been there the entire time. Even when Daniel couldn't feel it. Even when the nights felt empty. Even when the silence felt unbearable. Jesus had been there. Walking beside him. Strengthening him. Guiding him. And that is the truth many people discover later in life. God does not always remove your storms immediately. But he walks with you through them. Your lonely season has a purpose. Maybe you are watching this right now. And you feel exactly like Daniel once felt. Maybe your friends have disappeared. Maybe people you trusted walked away. Maybe your heart feels tired and forgotten. But listen carefully. Your loneliness is not meaningless. Your pain is not wasted. God sees every tear you cry. He hears every silent prayer. And even if you cannot see it now, he is preparing something beautiful in your life. The greatest truth. There is one truth that can change your life forever. People may leave. Friends may forget. Relationships may break. But Jesus never walks away. His love does not depend on your success. His presence does not depend on your popularity. And his faithfulness does not depend on how strong you feel. Even in your weakest moments, he stays. Final message. If you feel lonely today, remember this. Loneliness is not the end of your story. It might just be the chapter where God meets you the closest. One day you may look back at this painful season and realize something surprising. It was the moment that changed your life. Because sometimes, when everyone leaves, Jesus steps closer. And when Jesus walks with you, you are never truly alone. Let us pray. Lord Jesus, for every person watching this who feels lonely tonight, please fill their hearts with your peace. Remind them that they are never forgotten. Remind them that your love is stronger than their pain. Give them strength to continue walking forward. And help them discover the beautiful purpose you are preparing in their life. Amen. If this message touched your heart, remember, Your loneliness does not mean you are abandoned. It may mean Jesus is calling you closer. And never forget. Even when everyone leaves, Jesus stays.